Look at the flags lining the entrance of the United Nations headquarters in New York. Count them as they pass. You won't get far before you notice something. Red, white, blue, red, white, blue. France, the United States, Russia, Australia, Chile, the Netherlands, Norway, New Zealand, Cuba, Serbia, the Czech Republic. 29 countries, roughly 1 in 7 nations on Earth, carry some combination of red, white, and blue in their national flag. That doesn't include countries using just 2 of the 3. Maybe you figured it was coincidence. Maybe you assumed every country just wanted to look like America. Neither is right. What's behind this pattern is a 400-year chain reaction, starting in a small country fighting for independence, passing through a Russian Tsar, surviving 2 world wars and a revolution, and ending up stitched into flags on every continent. This is how red, white, and blue took over the world's flags, and why it was never about the colors at all. Before the politics and the empires, start with something most people overlook: fabric. Most flags weren't designed by artists in studios. They were cut and sewn under pressure, on ships, in military camps, in the middle of revolutions. The colors weren't always chosen for what they meant. They were chosen for what was available. Ted Kaye is the secretary of the North American Vexillological Association, the body that scientifically studies flags. When journalists ask him why red, white, and blue is everywhere, his first answer isn't symbolism, it's chemistry. The practical reason for red, white, and blue being popular is that those are the best, long-lasting colors in the history of dyes. White is the result of bleaching, relatively easy to create. Red and blue were strong dyes. So dye technology of hundreds of years ago favored red, white, and blue. Red and blue held their color. They didn't fade in sunlight. They survived salt water. Black fades quickly. Green was unstable. Purple, and we'll come back to purple, was so expensive it was effectively off the table. Before anyone decided what red meant or what blue stood for, those 2 colors were winning by default. Durable, reproducible at scale. When you're outfitting an army or a fleet, you need thousands of identical flags, not handcrafted originals. That's reason 1. But Kaye calls it the least important of the 4. The more important reason is what he calls flag families. In 1568, provinces in what is now the Netherlands rose up against Spanish rule. Their leader was William I, William the Silent, Prince of Orange. He went to war under livery colors: orange, white, and blue. By 1572, that banner was flying over Dutch ships. By 1575, it had its first recorded full-color depiction. That flag, the Prinsenvlag, or Prince's flag, is considered the world's first tricolour. 3 horizontal stripes, bold and visible at sea. Then something practical happened. The orange faded. The dye was unstable at sea. By 1630, captains were replacing orange stripes with red because red held. By 1660, the red, white, blue version had almost entirely replaced the original. The Dutch States General formalized it in 1664 as the Statenvlag, the state's flag. The Netherlands was now flying a red, white, and blue tricolour. The Dutch were the dominant maritime trading power in the world. Their flag flew from the stern of every vessel. In 1693, Tsar Peter the Great traveled to Western Europe to modernize Russia, its navy in particular, which barely existed. He visited the Netherlands and reportedly worked at a Dutch shipyard under a pseudonym. He was paying attention to the flags. In 1694, a Dutch-built frigate arrived in Russia flying the Dutch banner. Peter decided Russia's naval flag would use the same colors, rearranged: white on top, blue in the middle, red on the bottom. By January of 1705, he issued a formal decree. All Russian merchant vessels would fly the white-blue-red tricolour. He drew the sample himself. That sketch still survives in Russian archives. Now the most powerful Slavic nation on earth was flying a flag built from the Dutch design. When smaller Slavic nations began seeking independence throughout the 19th century, they looked to Russia for a model. In 1848, delegates at the Prague Slavic Congress formally adopted red, white, and blue as the pan-Slavic colors. Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, all drew their flags from that palette. One flag, one fading dye, one czar who borrowed what he saw, and the colors spread across an entire continent. On the other side of the world, a different engine was running. The British Union Jack, assembled in 1606 from the crosses of England, Scotland, and Ireland, was red, white, and blue, completely independent of the Dutch lineage. England's St. George's Cross, Scotland's St. Andrew's Cross, Ireland's St. Patrick's Cross, combined the same three colors. Then Britain built the largest empire in history, at its height covering roughly a quarter of the Earth's land surface. When colonies became independent, many kept the colors. Some kept the Union Jack in the corner of their new flag. Australia's flag still carries it. New Zealand's does too. On June 14, 1777, the Continental Congress resolved that the American flag would carry 13 red and white stripes, with 13 white stars in a blue field. The colors came from British heritage. The earliest American flags incorporated elements of the Union Jack. The symbolism came later. A story in the New York Inquirer described the flag as red for blood, shed for the country, blue for the heavens, the stars for the states, joined into one. Historian Schuyler Hamilton noted the colors simply matched the Army's uniforms. The flag came first. The explanation followed. That's what Kay means when he says meanings are often assigned after a flag is adopted. The symbolism isn't wrong. It's just not why the colors were chosen. France's tricolour has its own origin, tangled up in revolution and coincidence. Before 1789, France's royal flag showed a blue Bourbon shield with golden fleur-de-lis against white. When the revolution came, the street colors of Paris, red and blue, were everywhere. White was the Bourbon color. Combined, they produced a tricolour, influenced by the Dutch flag's horizontal stripes. The vertical blue-white-red became France's official national flag in 1794. The French and Dutch flags arrived at the same combination through entirely separate events, not coordination, but convergence. Once France and its revolutionary ideals became a global force, the tricolour became a symbol of republicanism. Newly independent states across Latin America adopted the same colors to signal the same values. Before we close, one question still needs an answer. If red, white, and blue won because of dye durability, why didn't purple? Purple is the color of royalty, of power. You'd expect empires to put it on their flags. They couldn't afford to. The dye, Tyrian purple, was extracted from a sea snail found only in a narrow stretch of the eastern Mediterranean. It took more than 10,000 snails to produce a single gram. 1 pound cost the equivalent of $56,000 in today's money. A Roman emperor reportedly barred his own wife from buying a purple shawl because the price was too steep. No government could justify putting it on a mass-produced flag. Then, in 1856, an 18-year-old English chemist named William Henry Perkin accidentally synthesized a purple compound while trying to produce an anti-malaria drug. He patented it, built a factory, and made purple affordable for the first time. But it was too late. The world's major nations had already fixed their colors. Today, only 4 sovereign nations include any purple in their flags: Dominica, Spain, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. And in most cases, it's a small detail, not a defining color. Purple lost the flag race before synthetic dye was ever invented. The snails were too slow, and history didn't wait. So why do so many flags use red, white, and blue? It wasn't a global agreement. It wasn't a shared ideology. And it had nothing to do with America setting a template for the world. It was a Dutch independence movement whose orange dye faded to red at sea. A Russian czar who saw a flag on a foreign ship and borrowed the design. A British empire that planted its colors in a quarter of the world. A French Revolution that turned a tricolour into a political statement. And a series of independence movements that looked at the flags of powerful nations and adopted the same palette to say the same thing. Red and blue held their color on the cloth. and they held their place on the map.